All right, welcome back to episode 8 of Steeler Thoughts and Chief Feelings. I am your co-host, Chris Dorst. I'm the philosophy professor and the Steelers fan in the group.
And I'm your other co host, Ajay Nair. I am the psychiatrist and Chiefs fan in this group. Thanks to all of you that have been following along on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts on your podcast apps. Also on TikTok at STCF8 and Instagram at STCF715 and Twitter at Thoughts14820.
It just rolls off the tongue now, doesn't it? It's
It,
like
it
I don't even
does.
want to change it anymore.
Yeah, I don't. Can we? I don't even know what the price. Like, would we be able to?
At first, we couldn't because they said you just made the account. We can't let you change this already. But I think maybe by now, I don't know. Who knows? Twitter's not very reliable now. So
Yeah, we'll see. If we make an update, we'll let you know.
uh,
All right. I feel like this time I guess we did State of the Steelers to start last time, so maybe we'll do the State of the Chiefs to start.
yeah, that's good with me. Obviously, there's some sort of timely news right off the top here, which is that the Chiefs traded Sneed to the Titans, not the Steelers, for a third rounder in 2025, right?
Yeah.
And then the swap of their seventh rounders this year, I think. So there, I took those to be like the main acquisitions on the Chiefs side of things. But if there's anything I'm leaving out there, let me know. But basically, I just wanted to get your thoughts on sort of, was that a good thing, or why do you think they did it, and what's your impression of whether they wanted to do it? I mean, obviously, they wanted to in some respect.
Yeah, I think ultimately it seems to come down to like the Chiefs have been fairly consistent with not paying people into their 30s, with not paying top of the market to people unless they consider them like indispensable franchise cornerstone. Like really, Mahomes and Chris Jones are the only people that have gotten top of the market money. Even Travis Kelsey hasn't. Um, and Travis Kelsey and Chris Jones are the only people that have been paid into their 30s. Nobody else has to this point. I mean, Mahomes is under contract into his 30s and will be playing into his 30s. But besides him, So it kind of goes with that and the fact that before investing a first round pick in Trent McDuffie a couple years ago, we had devoted almost no resources to the cornerback position. So it would be a real departure to start paying someone like close to 20 million a year to play corner. Clearly, there is infrastructure there that has been successful in finding corners that are not very valued around the league and getting good production out of them. And I think they're assuming they can continue to do so. And the corner room we have without Steed, it's not the same, but it's also not bad. Trent McDuffie is arguably by the end of the year was playing better than Sneed. Some would argue, including myself, I think. And Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams are serviceable players. They're like good, at least average to above average corners, and we have a bunch of young guys too, Nick Jones and Nazi Johnson, who are both seventh round picks who could come into the mix. So, and a couple undrafted guys too. We had a guy named Echo Boydo who was like fairly heralded last year too. So it's not surprising to me that they did this. I think that they just weren't going to pay the premium that L'Jarius Sneed wanted, unfortunately. Given his age, he's 27, and given he has fortunately not missed a lot of time after his rookie year when he broke his collarbone, but he has been kind of had like nagging injuries, and my sense is that maybe his knee issue is a little more significant than we even know. So that might have factored into it too.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I was curious to. So it sounds like you don't think the room is, or the cornerback room is, it's not bad at this point. But do you think that? I mean, they seem like they were kind of, from my perspective, they seem more willing to move on from him as opposed to playing him on the franchise tag than for one season than I would have expected. Getting a third rounder in 2025, like you might have thought that if he left in free agency next year, they would also get a compensatory draft pick. So it's not clear how much. I mean, I guess that wouldn't have been would that have been 2025, 2026, whenever. Uh, I don't know. It wasn't clear to me how much they gained by trading him now, as opposed to just playing him on the franchise tag for a year and then letting him walk. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one, the fact that they made this move like now makes me feel like they have plans for some of that money. Like they have a couple of things that they want to shore up roster wise before the draft, and they're looking for short term deals that they can get. Some people on 1 year or maybe 2 year deals that they can bring in. So I think that is one. Number two, the Chiefs have never been huge in the compensatory draft formula. I think partially because they don't want to be hindered by the fact that, if you're assuming you're getting a compensatory pick for Sneed, that means you can't sign a big name free agent. Otherwise, you're losing that compensatory pick anyway. And I don't think they want to think that way. It's they would much rather have a pick in hand rather than assuming, because the weird thing, and to be honest with you, I don't completely understand the compensatory formula, but my understanding is it's not just a third round value guy that can cancel out a third round value compensatory pick. Like if you sign a guy that is deemed like the value of a fifth round pick, you can still cancel out like player for player, draft pick for draft pick. So it's not so easy that like, oh, we had a big name guy, so even if we bring in a cheap guy, we're going to get that third round pick. I don't think that's the case. So the Chiefs at least don't view those as like guaranteed things. They would much rather have a pick in hand. And I'm honestly a little surprised that Chiefs fans are so surprised about the return. Because as we talked about a couple episodes ago, like corners don't go for a lot of money. Like Darrelle Revis and Jalen Ramsey are the only ones that have gone for more than a third round pick in the year that they were traded. When we traded Marcus Peters, we got a future second, but Marcus Peters still had, I believe, a year on his rookie contract plus a fifth-year option available, whereas Sneed has nothing, needs an entirely new contract right now. And even Jalen Ramsey, like he was traded once for the couple first-round picks, but then he was traded again before last season, and he only got a third-round pick and a backup tight end for him, and that was coming off of, I think he had been a Pro Bowler the last 3 years in LA, and the 2 years prior, not the year before he was traded, but the 2 years before that, he was first team All Pro. So, he's still widely considered one of the best corners in the league, and he went for a third round pick and a backup tight end. So, unfortunately, this seems to be the corner market right now, especially in a current draft that has a lot of corners. So, I'm kind of surprised that Chiefs fans are feeling like we didn't get it. I understand the idea of being like, he's worth more than that to us, so maybe we'll keep him on the tag, but I'm guessing the Chiefs just felt like that money was better spent somewhere else this year.
Yeah, and that's a great segue because my next question was going to be, I mean, given that they did restructure Mahomes' contract as you talked about last time, and so they have this sort of extra money now, you were speculating maybe that was for Snead on the franchise tag, but maybe not, and now it's definitely not. So do you have players in mind that do you think they might be looking at, or is it sort of wide open at this point?
I think for sure they need a defensive end, just somebody who's rotational. It might be Mike Dana, who was here last year and is still an unrestricted free agent, hasn't been signed anywhere. But we need definitely a defensive end because Charles Omenihu is out with an ACL tear, and we don't know when he's going to be back in the season. Additionally, we still don't have a left tackle. Like, unless they're really, really confident that Wanye Morris could step in and play, he looked okay in spurts and then bad in spurts also last year. So I think you need another option there. And then I still think they need one more free agent wide receiver. No one like big name or anything, but they need somebody that's rotational. So I think those three positions, I would feel so much better going to the draft if they were at least addressed with like a replacement level or slightly above average player.
Okay, yeah. So you said defensive end, left tackle, and wide receiver there. Obviously, probably at least wide receiver is still going to be a high draft priority, right? I mean, with all the wide receivers in this draft, it would be surprising if they didn't go for one early, I would think. Is that right?
Yeah, I would think all three might be draft priorities. The sense I get, which is purely just my speculation, and is that because wide receiver is so deep, if a tackle fell to them, I think that might be number one. But if a tackle doesn't fall, then yeah, I think wide receiver would be number one. And if they don't pick up like a more replacement level guy right now, they might go for draft two wide receivers, honestly. All right. But I wouldn't be upset with any of the three positions in the first round, just depending on who falls to them. And then, the one thing I would say though is that it gets harder and harder to find good tackles and especially defensive ends as you fall in the draft, whereas you can still get some wide receivers. So that might play into their calculation of where they go first round.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we've had plenty of trouble trying to draft offensive linemen late in the draft or middle of the draft even. That's a position where it seems like it's pretty clear. If you invest a high pick, you're going to probably, I mean, not definitely, but you're probably going to get some good return on that. Whereas if you invest a mid or low round pick, I don't know, it's a lot more of a crapshoot. But I think you're right with wide receivers. People hit on wide. I mean, maybe I'm biased from the Steelers' success, but we draft wide receivers third, fourth round, and they seem to work out more than not. So, um, yeah, okay. I feel like in some sense we're in a similar spot with expecting our team to do something wide receiver wise. Like I'm thinking we have a big hole too, and we would. I hope we sign someone before the draft, but if not, we better draft someone high. um, anyway, do you have anything else about? So my other questions about the Chiefs right now are more big picture. But is there anything else more about the maneuvering in the offseason here, or as we go up to the draft that you think is worth commenting on?
I don't think so. I think it'll just be right now for the Chiefs. I think it's just kind of that replacement level player now, just getting a couple competent people in at a few positions, and then we'll see how the draft goes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so where do you think? Next question then is where do you think the Chiefs fall in terms of the spectrum of use of analytics? Right, some teams are sort of old fashioned and don't use them too much, and others apparently use them quite a bit. And so, first question, I guess it's two parts. Where do you think they currently fall? And part two is where do you want them to fall?
I think they. I would guess that they actually are in the like higher quartile when it comes to season long decisions with analytics, as far as like playing time, for injury statistics, as far as passing percentage on early downs, things like that are more like game plan and how to manage the season. I think they might be like toward the higher users of analytics. Not so much in like in-game decision making. I think in-game decision making, fourth down decision making. I think we tend to be a lot more conservative than a lot of the win probability models would like us to be. So I but my guess is that yeah, we definitely do a lot as far as when thinking about how to run the team, how to run the offense, how to prioritize different kinds of plays. Unless it's just coincidental that Andy Reid thinks like the stats do too. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it could be that he's thinking exactly the same way that the stats would tell you to think, right? So hard to know exactly, but they do, you think, fall in line with the sort of season long um, trends that analytics say that they should be following.
Yeah, especially when it comes to like passing tendencies. I think our pass rates on early downs are very high. Um, Even when they talk about things like, you know, on late downs, like throwing to the sticks, throwing beyond the sticks, that's kind of come down a little bit because of how defenses play us recently. But in general, we have always been an aggressive team under Reed and Mahomes. And I think part of that's probably Reed using Mahomes' skill set, but I would assume some of it is based in analytics as well.
Yeah, do you remember when Alex Smith was there, whether it was similar? Like, were you passing a lot on early downs and whatnot?
Um, yeah, we were still passing on early downs, definitely not to this frequency. I will say we were doing a lot more short passing though. In fact, like I remember, I can't credit the person because I don't remember who it was, but they literally came up with an acronym called ALEX, ALEX, to describe like the rate at which quarterbacks would throw short of the sticks on third down. And I don't remember what the acronym stands for anymore, but like he was notorious for that. So that changed with Mahomes. But we did still, we had better, more complete run games then, but our offensive line structure was also completely different then. I feel like we prioritized the tackles and we got like guards and interior linemen that moved a lot. And now we kind of have this power running interior line that can still pull, but it's not like we had the light, nimble people like we used to. So, but yeah, I do think I mean, I know we still threw at a very high rate back then. I don't think as high as now, but we were in that sense still, a pass first offense like the analytics would suggest.
Yeah. Um, I can. I don't know if that was frustration at the reminiscing about throwing short of the sticks on third down, but if that's frustration, I can sympathize. That's been our MO for years now. You just wonder why. You wonder why. That's what you do. um, so that's where you think that they do fall. Do you want them to fall somewhere else, either in the sort of in-game decision making or season-long sort of trends in terms of how much they use analytics?
I'm comfortable with how they do their season long. I think that Andy does a good job of kind of because he will buck the trend a little bit when the defense dictates it, and I like that. In game, I'm definitely not as mad at as Andy Reid as a lot of people are about in game decision making. I feel like I do agree with them that he's a little too conservative on fourth down, though I wouldn't say that he was this year because this offense is not one that I would have trusted on a lot of those gotta have it fourth down plays. But in the past, I think he's been a little conservative on fourth down. But Andy Reid will take points when points are available. Um, so some of those real like short yardage, especially where the passing game is possible, 4th and 4 kind of range. I think Andy doesn't really like to go for it, and it would be nice if he did a little bit in opponent's territory. But as we talked about a couple weeks ago, I think, there are times when getting a couple field goals still keeps the game going and keeps you in advantageous positions, even though it kind of feels terrible in the moment. So I'm perfectly comfortable with Andy how he is. If he would turn it up just a tick and the in-game stuff, I'd be fine with that. But I'll take him.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you've got a good kicker too. It makes those field goal decisions easier, especially when they're, around the 30 or 35 even. Is there anything that his sort of in-game decision making, but maybe not play calling, maybe something else that you would want to change?
I think so. There was a time, I would say before, I'm not going to remember the exact time, but it was probably around the 2016 range when I felt like he got so much better at managing like end of half stuff. His timeouts and the way he was, because he used to be really bad even in Kansas City. We would take too long on our drives. We would waste a lot of time, wouldn't use timeouts appropriately, and it wasn't just Mahomes coming. I feel like this happened a year or two before Mahomes came. Andy Reid started really getting it down, and we had some really clutch end of half, end of game drives that I felt like we were struggling with before. So that's not really a complaint for me anymore. Probably the number one thing is it surprises me the number of times. It'll be like 1 or 2 times every year that we will have a play that it seems incredibly obvious that we should challenge, and we don't challenge it for whatever reason. And I don't know if it's like a timing thing. They can't get someone to radio down from the booth in time. I mean, what year was that? Was that 2021, I think? We had a home game against Denver where Mahomes threw a bomb for a touchdown to Tyreek Hill, but it was called incomplete. And the problem was the ball had like bounced up and like gone on Hill's back, and then he ended up catching it, but Hill himself didn't know it hadn't hit the ground. And we didn't get the replay. We punted that ball before the replay came in that we had scored a touchdown. So it's stuff like that. This year, I would say in the AFC title game, I think Travis Kelsey converted a third down that we ended up going for it on fourth down and not getting it, and we didn't get points in that drive. We were in their territory, and I really think he would have made it on the replay review, but Andy didn't challenge.
Mm. So yeah, like when to challenge essentially sounds like your biggest
Yeah,
complaint.
and he doesn't seem to do the other way. Like, I don't remember a lot of times where he's unnecessarily challenged things. It's just that he's not quick to throw the flag at times when you're like, this seems obvious. You got to challenge this.
Mm. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's an interesting contrast with Tomlin because he'll do it the way I don't want in both directions. uh, but uh, but good. Yeah. So overall, though, that seems like you're pretty happy. I mean, it's interesting that you commented on him getting significantly better about like late game clock management around 2016 because it is a situation where you would think like as far as bang for your buck in terms of like effort you put in term and wins you get out, that's a real bang for your buck sort of aspect of coaching. If you can appropriately manage those situations, you're going to get probably one or two more wins a year on average, I would think, as opposed to like managing them incompetently. So it's surprising to me that more coaches don't put emphasis into that. Um, I don't know
Yeah,
exactly why that
especially
is.
I wonder if it's like with some coaches. This isn't an original idea. A lot of people suggested this, but I I feel like the first person I remember was Bill Simmons saying it, but I hear it a lot with people like you should just have somebody at your side that's just all their job. Someone who plays Madden all the time, or someone who like, it does seem like those kinds of things because it's hard in the moment. You're thinking of 20 million things. Why don't you just have one guy that's like this is where it makes sense to take your timeouts. This is where it makes sense, just in your ear, like timeout now. Like I feel like that kind of delegation, if you had someone you trust, would be fairly easy.
Yeah, and some of those, yeah, to have just someone who's, here's a pitch. Like every NFL team should hire a sort of game theorist, basically, that is like thought
Yeah,
through the different scenarios and how that affects what the other team does in timeout usage near the end of half. Because like, why not, right? It's going to
yeah.
help you win. And if other teams are doing it and you're not doing it, then all the worse. Um, okay. So I have one more sort of general Chiefs question. I mean, depending on how the time goes here, I have other questions about the Chiefs as well. But here's another sort of spectrum question. Uh, that is where they fall on a spectrum between, on the one hand, like think about offenses that win primarily, or when they are moving well, they do that primarily by sort of winning one-on-one matchups and making good plays, good individual efforts, versus offenses that are highly schemed. I think here like McVay style offenses or whatever. Do you think where would you put the Chiefs in that spectrum? And again, where would you want them to be in that spectrum?
Well, so I think they, by design, they're actually very heavily toward the scheme side of it. Um, but because of Mahomes and Kelsey, they end up kind of falling somewhere in the middle because they're both like just incredible individual effort people. And sometimes, one thing that was so surprising to me um, was how much the Chiefs sideline in the Super Bowl was when we were coming down toward the end was based, even like Marquez Valdez Scantling was like, listen, it's either going to be 15 or 87. That's it. Like that's the kind of stuff they're saying on the sideline in overtime when they're getting down the field. And actually, one of the things they said, actually, I don't, the last play in regulation when we were trying to score to win the game before kicking the field goal to tie it to go to overtime, Mahomes threw a back shoulder pass to Kelsey. And I had felt like because the snap was low, he would have hit Rashee Rice over the middle, but the timing was thrown off and that he was going to Kelsey. And that was completely disproven by what Mahomes said before the play. He was basically like, listen, we got time for one play. And he goes to Kelsey. He's like, it's you or nobody. And so, they're basically, the two of them are just able to do that. But in Andy Reid, I think, designs the offense to be a scheme, to win with scheme. And that was painfully true before Mahomes came, because if the scheme didn't win, we had nothing. And our first 15 would look great, and we would have, when the scheme was winning that day, we'd look great, and if not, it was just impossible. So I think we've been able to marry it really well because we have a couple really good individual effort guys, and hopefully we can get a few more individual effort guys to vary it a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. But it sounds like you're generally pleased with the amount of sort of in-structure scheme plays and the amount of just great individual effort plays. Yeah, that's interesting. So back to the that last play of regulation. I don't remember the throw itself to Kelsey, but I remember thinking, yeah, we talked about the middle of the field looking open there. Um, what if the snap had been better if he could have done a better throw or something, or do you think it was covered too well?
I do think it was covered really well. Fred Warner really had him. Mahomes, I would also guess that because of how well Fred Warner covered it, that Kelsey didn't see the ball until really late. Because it's not like it was completely out of his grasp. He was able to get his right hand on it really late, but the impression I got was he wasn't able to track it until the very end. And I think that's because Fred Warner was covering like 75% of his vision. It was just it was a tough place. I think Mahomes put it where he had to put it. There just was no room.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even when you're a superstar, you can't make every play. But, yeah, but okay. So yeah, I think right. It would be nice to have another sort of superstar pass catcher for Mahomes to have. Kelsey's getting a little up there, right? So get someone else that can build that rapport with Mahomes over time and make plays out of structure, out of scheme. Yeah. So Deontay Johnson could have been him.
I know. I feel like he would have fit so, and it doesn't have to be that great, right? Like if you look at what Juju did, like Juju won in the scheme, but also was smart enough to be like know when it was time to do other things. And I mean, the amount that Mahomes trusted him by the end of that season, he was only there once, was really incredible. Like I really do believe that at the right price, the Chiefs would have wanted him back, but I also think they were worried about injuries similar to Sneed with Juju.
Yeah, I mean I think he's had a lot by now, right? And for his, I mean I don't know how old he is now, but he came into the league so young, that he was to have that many injuries by now is probably pretty unusual. Yeah, but I mean he should have stayed, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I wish he
hindsight
did.
2020, but um, well, I have other questions. I mean, so one general question that I want to get addressed at some point in the off season is to learn a little bit more about your history and why you like the Chiefs and like why you are a Chiefs fan essentially. And I think I know maybe a part of the story, but so maybe now is a fine time for that. If just like, what led you to become a Chiefs fan? And so that's like the first part of the question. Maybe the second part, which we can think more about next week or in the coming weeks. Sort of how would you justify being a Chiefs fan? Like explain why this is worth your time or worth one's time. So, but first, let's just talk about the causal history. Do you want to say a bit about like sort of what led you to become a Chiefs fan?
Yeah, I can't say that I have like a great precise memory, but so I used to go to, both my parents worked at the University of Missouri when I was a kid. And so I actually went to a preschool and daycare like on the campus of the university. I think it's kind of an ominous title now that you think about it, but it was actually called Child Development Lab was the name of the daycare. But and so the people that were there were all affiliated with the university. Usually would be like graduate students in child psychology, or actually the child psychiatry residents used to like rotate. Our fellows used to rotate there and would like observe us when we were kids and stuff, including my mom, who was a child psychiatry fellow during part of my time there. But so one of the counselors there was just a big like sports guy in general, and weirdly enough, he was a Raiders fan. Um, so I know that like that was part of the reason I got into sports was because I would talk to him about sports all the time, and also because we didn't have cable when I was a kid growing up, and I was only allowed to watch TV on the weekends. And all that's on like NBC, ABC, CBS on the weekends is sports. And during football season, back then, NBC, when I started watching football, NBC used to carry the AFC, um, and Fox still carried the NFC. Although for a time, CBS carried the NFC, but I don't think that was when I was watching. It was the AFC was on NBC, which is the channel we got the best. And so the Chiefs used to show up on NBC, and then every couple. We didn't get Fox very well on our antenna, so sometimes I would have to go to someone else's house when we would host an NFC team because it would be on Fox. Uh, so and then Monday Night Football used to be on ABC, so it was always just football. And NBA used to be on NBC back then too. So I just watched a ton of sports. And I know Columbia, Missouri is generally a Chiefs town because the Rams came to St. Louis, I want to say in 95, 95 or
That's
96,
right.
something like that.
Yeah.
And now they've left again. So there's no one else in Missouri. So that was the team. Why I particularly picked them, I guess they must have just been on TV the most, is my guess. Like, but the weird thing is, I don't remember watching football without being a Chiefs fan. Like well, that's not true. I do remember vaguely watching the Steelers Cowboys Super Bowl at the end of the 95 season.
That's weird because I have a memory of watching that game too, and I don't really, yeah, nothing precise about it, but I wasn't a Steelers fan at that point,
Yeah,
oddly.
I don't. I think I was undifferentiated as well at that point. So that's the first football memory I have is watching that Super Bowl. But the first Chiefs game, and maybe I was watching more because I was clearly very invested. I remember at the end of the 96 season, the Chiefs were playing in Buffalo, and we had to win that game to make the playoffs. And the Chiefs had made the playoffs like the last 5 years or something, like 91 through 95. They had made the playoffs every year. And we lost that game. If I remember correctly, I think the score was 20-9. We lost in Buffalo. I remember being like really torn up about that. That's my first Chiefs game I remember watching at the end of the 96 season. Why I cared about them at that point, I don't know. I don't remember watching any Chiefs games before then not caring about them, but somehow that's what happened.
Yeah, that's interesting because my memory of your story here is I must be, I guess I just didn't have all of the. I remember the I guess the counselor at the child development lab that you mentioned. I don't remember them personally, but I remember you talking about them. But uh, there was something. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there something about our social studies teacher in sixth or seventh grade who was a diehard Rams fan? And somehow he turned you off from any sympathy toward the Rams and made you go more hard toward the Chiefs. Am I making this up?
I mean, definitely he did, but I was a Chiefs fan before then. I don't think I became very hateful toward the Rams during that
Okay.
time, like because of him, like because the Rams won the Super Bowl before we met him, right? And I remember
I
being
guess.
like I wasn't like cheering as if it was my team going to the Super Bowl, but I was happy that a Missouri team won the Super Bowl. I was a little bit annoyed at the time too because I was like, the Rams have stunk for so long, and the Chiefs have been good, and now they win the Super Bowl before we did. Like, I remember thinking that, but I had no antipathy toward them until we met our social studies teacher, and I never understood why he was so antagonistic toward the Chiefs. It's like we're in different conferences, but he just like really came hard after him, and so I developed a dislike for them as well.
I see. So that was an explanation of your dislike of the Rams, not an explanation of your partiality to the Chiefs. I gotcha.
Right.
Okay. Good. Well, so there you have some of Ajay's history of why he's a Chiefs fan, or how he became one at least. Yeah. So I imagined if we were going to tell the story of why one is justified in being a football fan, we'll have to tell a very different story here. But anyway, maybe we should take a break now and then come back a bit.
And we're back. Um, All right, so now that we've completed the state of the Chiefs, we can move on to some Steelers topics. Uh, so, the first thing I wanted to ask you is just that there's been quite a bit of a shuffle in free agency. People coming in, people going out. And we had talked a little bit about the draft a couple episodes ago. And at that point, I think the main focus of our discussion was the cornerback position. But I wonder, after all the changes that you've had, do you have any different thoughts about what, let's say, your top three needs right now in the draft going forward? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I think. I'm sorry, my dog is. Actually, I did say that one day I would put my dog in the camera here. So I'll. Here you go, Mocha. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can now see the dog that was burping on my lap last time. Um, anyway, sorry. Yeah, good question about where I think we need to be headed in the draft. Um, right now, it's definitely feeling like wide receiver is the maybe the number one priority. I'm still sort of hoping we keep signing these like wide receivers that I had never heard about before. Uh, that like so I think our offense right now, if you look at the pass catchers on it, it's like Pickens, and then if you combine everybody else, uh, their stats last year, they don't even add up to as many yards as Pickens had. So
Oh, wow.
it's not looking great. And Pickens was, he was developing still. He's still developing, right? So I don't even feel that comfortable relying on him as a number one receiver at this point. I mean, maybe he can prove me wrong there. I would love him to, but he's definitely a very talented receiver. I still think of him kind of as a number two. So I don't think you're going to draft a wide receiver and plug them in as a number one. um, but clearly, we need to do something there. I think picking a wide receiver high would be good. So I think that's now my number one priority. We need a center. So that would be maybe. I mean, we need that at least as badly as the receiver. So maybe I don't know. These are the kinds of things that I hope we do something pre-draft to address, so that we're not sort of forced to draft somebody that falls to us, or that like the draft doesn't play out and we have to make some major concessions to get a player that we need to fill a spot. So those are the two main ones that I would worry about, wide receiver and center. And then I do think cornerback is still going to be in. I mean, it's hard to know exactly, but I don't really know what to expect from Dante Jackson, the guy that we got from Carolina. Um, I've heard different opinions about how good to expect him to be. Um, I do expect Joey Porter Jr. to still be good or be better next year than he was this year. So hopefully he can be, I guess, our number one cornerback next year. But yeah, it's a little dicey. So maybe draft another cornerback. I'm still hopeful that Corey Trice, the guy that got like tore his ACL last year, I think in training camp. There was optimism about him, and it would be nice to get him back. And hopefully he still has his speed and whatnot. Obviously, he hasn't had any playing experience for a year, so that also is a concern. But probably those are the three: wide receiver, center, and cornerback that I would think we need to address with high picks.
Do you think, as a team that, just off the top of my head, I can remember Dermani Dawson, who I feel like was like Pro Football Reference has as like don't quote me on this, but it's something like maybe the best offensive lineman or the best center ever or something. It's very, very high in their like Hall of Fame predictor or whatever it's called. Um, and then you've had Marquise Pouncey. Like, is there something about Pittsburgh and Mike Webster? I didn't even think of Mike Webster. Like, is there something about Pittsburgh that's predicated on having like an outstanding center, not just a good one?
Yeah, maybe it's something about like the Steelers mentality, the blue collar mentality. A center is not a glorious job, right? You don't get a lot of highlight reel play as the center, but you do a lot of the dirty work, right? Maybe there's something about that that jives with the Pittsburgh kind of fan mentality. Um, but we've had some not great centers recently. So as we've talked about on here before. So yeah, that's it, it would be nice to get back to that because I think with the kind of power running game that I expect to have or be an emphasis with Arthur Smith, you want to be able to sort of push people around at the line of scrimmage, and a good center is obviously crucial to that. So yeah, I think I would not be upset about drafting a center in the first round. I mean, again, there's like nuances about exactly, do we do anything about wide receiver before the draft or not? But anything, a high center or high wide receiver would be good news to me.
Actually, this kind of on a tangent, but now that I thought of three like stellar centers, I'm thinking like if you were to pick one position that would be like the quintessential Steelers position, like if you think about through Steelers history, I mean, can you do better than center? I feel like that's a pretty good list. Dawson, Pouncey, and Mike Webster.
Yeah, yeah, that is pretty good. And they
I
do
guess,
they like ooze Pittsburgh, right?
yeah. I mean, I
um,
guess you. I mean, Ben and Terry Bradshaw is a good place to start with quarterbacks too. I guess,
yeah,
but
I guess so. I mean, I don't know. I was about to say I don't know Terry as well as if I'm on a first name basis with him and yet don't know him very well. But definitely Ben sort of had that Pittsburgh mentality, right? Getting his nose broken mid play and still going. But and one of my favorite plays of his is that one where he's like shoving off Terrell Suggs and then throws an incompletion just to live another day, essentially. That seems like very Pittsburgh. So yeah, I think Ben embodied the Steelers way or the Pittsburgh way or whatever. But the center is like the history of people we've had at center is, yeah, we've got a
or
good storied history there.
running back like Franco Harris, Jerome Bettis. I can't think of a third. Like,
Yeah, who's the
I'm.
next one?
Who's the next one?
Um,
Fast Willie Parker wasn't really Pittsburgh,
no, I don't think
although
so.
he has the longest run in Super Bowl history. Right? I don't think that's been beaten yet.
Yeah, that 75 yarder, which there was nothing to it, right? It was just like follow the blocking and run fast, right? Um, in one direction. But yeah, yeah, I wouldn't put like Mendenhall in there or anything like that. I mean, if Le'Veon Bell had stayed,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
and I thought his career was on such a good trajectory at that point. Not that he's definitely different, right? He's not as like he's not like a bruiser mentality, maybe like I associate with Jerome Bettis. And I don't know Franco Harris's highlights as well. I know his highlights, I guess, but I don't know his running style as well. Um, but I think Bell could have been another like in the top three Steelers running backs of all time if he had continued at the pace he was on in 2017 or 2016.
And I'm thinking wide receiver because you got Lynn Swan, James Lofton, Hines Ward, Antonio Brown, even
Yeah,
Plexico Burris was a little short lived.
he was short lived, but he did have that. He was that rookie year. He's like the real. It's oddly enough, the only like tall, good tall wide receiver I think Ben had in his career. Right? I mean, Martavis Bryant, I guess maybe could arguably be in that conversation too. But Ben frequently did not have tall receivers, and I don't know if that was by design. Maybe they, yeah, I don't know, but I could imagine being a little miffed if I were him, thinking like, why can't we ever get a tall target? We have like the 5'10" Santonio Holmes and 6 foot Hines Ward and um, yeah, Antonio Brown. What is he? 5'11", I think. But yeah.
Wait,
Anyway, not that they were bad.
I forgot about Santonio. Wait, so did Ben win a Super Bowl MVP?
No, no, he
No.
didn't. No,
Oh wow.
I mean, the first one he definitely should not have. It was the worst Super Bowl quarterback performance one can imagine. At least winning performance one can imagine. and then the one with Santonio catching the touchdown, Santonio won it on that, justifiably. So um, I think you could have given it to either one of them. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting. And then, sorry, I keep continuing this exercise. I feel like Troy almost could carry the safety by himself if, because Minka's there. But I think Rod Woodson was a corner when he played in Pittsburgh, I think, right? He wasn't
yeah, I
a
think that's
safety
right.
until later in his career.
Yeah. Uh, Mel Blunt, what did he play? Safety.
Oh, Mel Blount.
Um,
Yeah. I feel like he was a safety. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's right. He's got that cowboy hat. Nice look.
Yeah.
Um, that's another thing. When we were in Texas, I started to think like somehow it started to like, oh,
Oh,
I could
really?
wear a cowboy hat, right? Yeah.
You
Now that
get
I'm
the
out of
fever.
Texas, yeah, something happens when you're in Texas. And the cowboy hat starts to look appealing. It doesn't
Wow.
appeal to me anymore, but somehow like we were in the gift shops. And I was like, something nice about that.
Was it just the hat or the boots too?
The boots I can't do. No, I can't do
No.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. Although I
Interesting.
don't know, can you do it? Can you do the hat without the boots? Like with running shoes, that would look pretty stupid, I imagine, if you had the
Yeah.
cowboy hat and Hoka's or something. So maybe you
Also,
have
I
to.
feel like the boots can be kind of, if you have like jeans that'll come over them, they can be subtle. Like you can, hide the
Yeah.
boots a little.
I mean, that's right, but then you could also just have, like, I have shoes now that if I put jeans over them, they would look like they could be boots, maybe you can't quite tell.
Oh
And
yeah.
I would prefer those to the boots that make the extra sort of like clucking sound when they I don't know, when they hit the ground or whatever. um, yeah, so it's weird uh, being in a place and suddenly thinking, oh yeah, that's not a bad look. I think I was thinking of Indiana Jones when I was looking at them. Like, yeah, they look good on Indiana Jones, but it doesn't mean they look good on me.
It's funny. Um, any other position? I guess linebacker, but that's tough because outside linebacker and inside's not really, was because there have been like the inside guys like Jack Lambert and James Farrier, and then the
Yeah,
pass rushers. Well, I guess when you're a historic franchise, then you're gonna have a lot of positions that have a lot of stellar players.
I think it's also like hard for me to disentangle like when I think back to like Joey Porter or James Farrier, right? Like outside and inside, but it's hard for me to disentangle how much of a household name they actually were versus how much I idolized them because I was young and impressionable, and these were the players that I knew on the Steelers, and so I now still give them a prominent role in my thinking about the history of the Steelers. But objectively, were they as prominent as I am making them out to be? I can't tell. There's certain players you can tell, right? Like Troy was kind of timeless. Bettis was kind of timeless, but people like Joey Porter and James Farrier, I'm less sure about their role in the sort of Steelers pantheon.
Yeah, that's a tough. I feel like we should call this the Joey Porter test because I feel like he's perfectly on the line. Like James Farrier, I would say no, he's not like a household name, but Joey Porter, like maybe, like I don't know.
Yeah,
He's like right there, and then he might get bolstered by his son. He might become
exactly.
more of
That's
a
what I was
household name.
thinking. Right. Like if his son is also like a Steeler borderline great or something, then that makes the case better for both of them. Right.
So this actually reminds me, I'm going to get way off topic now, but this reminds me of a conversation I was having with my wife about, so I was listening, Chuck Klosterman. I don't know if you know Chuck Klosterman. He was an ethicist that wrote for Rolling Stone for a while. I don't know if he still is doing that, but basically he writes books now, and it basically about the history of music is his favorite topic, it seems. But he came on the podcast and went down this rabbit hole talking about like Taylor Swift and what she's accomplished. And one of the things he said that she hadn't done was create a song that will kind of outlive her legacy. And so then they started talking about the ideas of like, what are these songs that like people know the song even if they don't know who the artist is? They kind of transcend the artist's fame. And this conversation reminded me of that. And now my wife and I have been like every couple days we'll randomly be like, "Hey, what about this song? Like the one I thought of most recently was "I Feel Good" by James Brown. I feel like most people will just know that song even if they
Hmm.
don't know James Brown at all.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, but I feel like we're kind of it's the Joey Porter line in football. It's like, is it? He's a good one. I don't know that.
Is it like, yeah, something that like yeah, you'll remember the name even if you don't know anything about them, essentially, right? Like,
Yeah,
is
if
that
you
true
never
for Joey
witnessed their
Porter?
career, you never saw them play, but or you no vested interest in them, but you know who they are and you know something about it. Like Rod Woodson, right? Like I feel like
Yeah,
well,
you
this
can't
is
not know who he
also
is.
no, and this is also something about like the football bubble we lived in. This is another debate I actually had with my wife. She's convinced that if you polled like people under 25, that the vast majority, even men, wouldn't know who Peyton Manning is. And I was like, man, really?
Wow.
Like, I don't know, but I, I, I mean, I feel like Peyton Manning is still like present enough that at least if you got the male demographic, like he does, he does commercials and he's still around the game. But
He
there are a
does
lot
the
of people that
ESPN thing with
the
Eli
Eli
too,
Manning
right?
cast, yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Maybe
mean,
that's
I
just
don't.
maybe that's just for us.
I know,
Like
I
the
know.
people.
It, I was just so surprised because she really feels like Brady is on a different level from Manning because of Giselle. Uh, and there's, we started by talking about how it's like blowing my mind now that I think it's true though that Travis Kelsey is more famous than Patrick Mahomes, and that's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's true because of Taylor Swift. And so then I don't know. I feel like I need to do a poll because I don't think she's right about Manning, but I'm not sure that she's wrong. You know what I mean? Like it's like maybe she's right. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, this is the again, we're way down the rabbit hole of like being off topic here, but let's just indulge it for a second. Like when I'm teaching classes and I start to like want to reference the Matrix, for example, 1999. Like, can I reference that now? Well, I still do, and I think it still gets traction. I mean, they did the fourth movie or whatever a couple of years ago, so maybe that's why it gets some traction. But
Oh yeah.
uh,
Did you watch that?
not good, not good,
Oh
not good. Did you watch it?
no.
Yeah,
I
don't
completely
do it.
forgot it happened until you just mentioned it.
Yeah, that I wish I forgot. Yeah, there. Okay, well, we're in it now. Let me just give you my 2 cents on that movie. There were cool ways they could have sort of rebooted it, I think. And I was a pretty big Matrix fan back in the day. Um, and here's the way I would do it, right? Do something. You know how they had that little what's it motif of the black cat running by twice, and that was a glitch in the
hmm
Matrix. That means
Deja
they
vu.
changed
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
they should have done something like that, right? They rebooted it in a way that, like, if they had done this, that this is a deja vu. It means they changed something, right? Like you can imagine a sort of developing a plot based on that, right? Rebooting it and making it
Yeah.
a deja vu kind of situation. They did it so they did it like I don't know, so stupidly. I'll just leave it like that. That it was very disappointing. But I guess I didn't have high expectations going in, and I was still massively disappointed.
Oh, that's too bad.
Hard to
Wow.
do. Yeah.
Are you still up on? Because for me, I feel like I maintain a lot of confidence in my memory and understanding of the first Matrix movie, but not so much the second and third. I feel like I need to rewatch them.
I watched them more times than would be reasonable. So I probably remember basically the key points. Speaking of watching, we're just on like this is like a free association game here. But speaking of movies, I watched more times than would be reasonable. I heard recently that Star Wars Episode One, is being re-released on the 25th anniversary of the original release.
Oh,
I
really?
saw that movie like I can't remember. It might have been like 10 times in theaters or something like that. And my brother was texting me like maybe we should go see it again for old times' sake. uh, Objectively very bad movie, but one that as what a 10 or 11 year old at the time I was enamored with. I might have to see it again.
Had you watched, like, had you grown up on Star Wars?
Yeah, yes. I said, well, I at one point in like the mid '90s, they released like special editions with better special
Hmm.
effects, which by today's standards would be still terrible. But um, and I remember getting those as they came out on VHS and being like completely enamored with them, such that I was like thinking about them all the time. I remember being playing like team soccer and just sort of like paying no attention to the game, just walking around the like staring at the grass and thinking about Star Wars. Right, this was what I did for a little while there. I was a huge Star Wars fan. I used to think to
Uh,
myself also like, I hope there's never a time when I'm not a Star Wars fan, which is a pretty weird.
yeah,
It's a
that's
pretty
pretty
weird
young to
thought
be
to
thinking
have.
that. At that age, that's really weird. I feel like it's
It's
one
weird
thing
for
when you're like,
yeah. Go ahead.
it's one thing for an adult, I feel like, but I feel like that's actually quite advanced level of thinking for a child to be thinking that way.
I don't know. Is it so? This is I feel like the thought itself is odd, right? I hope that I'm. I mean, this relates to football fandom too. Let's see if I can tie this back. But like to hope that you always like this thing. What is that hope about? Like maybe the thought is if I don't like this, then I won't find anything else that's as rich as it. Uh, I mean, that's a kind of maybe naive thought that a kid would have. Maybe that's what I was thinking. But presumably, like if you don't like it, it's because something better came along, right? Uh, and so it just seems odd to think that like for the benefit of my future self, I hope I still like Star Wars as much as I do now. So
Or maybe you had a great appreciation for how much enjoyment you were getting out of it. And see, the part of it that I find is very advanced is the understanding of the fleeting nature of things like this. Like when you're a kid, your present kind of feels like it'll always exist.
yeah,
You don't really have that understanding that, like, as much as I want something to continue, like, I feel like if when I was 7, I would have been like, I'm always going to like this forever. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't even conceptualize the fact that I wouldn't. I want to like this. This is awesome. Of course I'm going to like this. To understand that there's a degree that you don't have control over is actually really interesting for a kid to be like, maybe I won't like this. It's like, wow, I don't know that most kids are capable of that when you're like 7, 8 years old.
I don't know. I don't know if there was anything that advanced about the thought, but I appreciate the perspective. Yeah, I guess that's right though. I guess like to to think of things as transient, things like that as transient. I guess is I don't know. I mean, I guess I still have. I guess right. It would. I would express a similar thought right now. Right. I hope there's not a day when I'm not a Steelers fan. Right. But I don't know. That gets hairy because I'm again. How strongly should I hope that? I'm not sure. Because if
But
I'm not, then probably it's for good reason, right?
but it may be that, like, you hope not because you hope that reason doesn't come across, because what the present relationship you have with your Steelers fandom is so good, you wouldn't want any of that to change.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the best it's been right now, but yeah,
That's true.
uh, yeah, that's fair. I guess I hope less. I hope that my hope is less strong right now that I'm never a Steelers fan, or that I am always a Steelers fan.
What would that
It
peak
has been
hope
at
have been?
times.
Like February 2009? What would it be like the peak have
Yeah,
been?
maybe. Yeah. Or I think January 2010. Right. Well, or I
Right
guess that was
before that
2011 when
Super
we
Bowl?
were going to that. Yeah. Yeah, that was what I was like. Oh, this is our third Super Bowl now. Like, we'll just do this every couple of years. It'll be great. Anyway,
That was also, wasn't that the playoff run where, like, in the divisional round the Ravens went up really big and then you came back and won? That
yeah,
game was, oh man, that was as exciting of a non-Chiefs fan Chiefs game I remember watching. I had actually gone out to Squirrel Hill that day, and on my way the bus driver had a Ravens jersey on. And I remember saying something to her about the game, like, "Well, I hope you enjoy it" or something. And then remember thinking about her when the Steelers went down. I was like, "Well, she's probably having a great time." And then, wow, I just remember that being like such an intense comeback. And then almost the reverse happened in the title game, right? Didn't It was the Jets game like that? That
yep.
got really hairy at the end, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember what the final score of that was, but it was. I mean, we were up big, and then I think Ben had a really bad game. I think he threw like three picks or something, uh, and it came down to the really down to the wire. And I think it was a conversion, a third down conversions from maybe Ben to Brown or something like that that sealed it. Was it Brown at that stage? Who knows what it was?
Was that the?
Uh,
There was one convert. I want to say this is the same game, but where it was like a deep pass down the right sideline that like Brown like kind of barely caught. Like, was
that was
that
the
that
Ravens
game?
one.
Oh, that was
That
the
was, I think
Ravens
that
one.
was
Oh, okay.
yeah, that was to. We had like a third and 18 or something like that, I think the game was tied at that point. Uh, and so we were about, like really that was maybe it was 24-24 or something, but we don't convert that, and the Ravens are probably in the ball with good field position and not a lot of time on the clock. So yeah, that was a huge conversion there, down to like the Ravens five or something, and then we scored later.
Yeah, that was it's quite a playoff run. If I remember, the funny thing too is people were as excited in Pittsburgh that the Jets beat the Patriots as like the
Yeah,
Steelers beating the Ravens. I remember.
yeah, we never wanted to play them in the playoffs, the Patriots. So.
Um, all right. Well, let me pivot back to the state of the Steelers. We kind of talked about the team and what you think about for next year, but based on the changes that you've made, we talked a little bit stylistically about what Russell Wilson would look like in Arthur Smith's offense, and a play action passing game with deep passes off of play action. What do you think schematically, based on who you have on defense? What do you think the strength of the defense will be, and how do you feel like they might scheme to try to stop offenses?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll be honest, I'm worried about the defense next year. I feel like we've had a lot of seasons where, the defense has been good for a while and you can't just expect them to still be good. I kind of think we might, I mean, for non-detailed reasons, for very abstract reasons, I guess I just think that we might be in for a little bit of a down year defensively. Uh, that it could be injury based or whatnot. I mean, I think the linebackers are probably going to like our strongest group right now, which is a weird group to be like the most confident in. You would like to be more confident in the defensive line or the secondary, I guess, if you had to pick one of them. But no, I think I'm more confident in the linebackers. And so, what does that do? I don't know. Hopefully, we'll be good at stopping the run, but again, a lot of that is going to depend on the defensive line, setting the gaps up right and whatnot. But or plugging the holes correctly. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how I see the defense being this year. I think that we should still have a good pass rush. I mean, TJ Watt, unless he gets hurt or something, which I guess is a concern. He's getting a little older. Um, and JJ Watt had so many years where he was done for the year with injuries. So that's a worry that TJ Watt could be more injury prone later in his career here. But I mean, presumably, if he doesn't get hurt, he'll still be a good pass rusher. I think um, Alex Highsmith, I think, is a good pass rusher. Better, of course, when Watt's in there and the other team can't devote as much attention to him. But um, so, how does it go? I guess if we can stop the run effectively and have a good pass rush, then you just hope that whoever we've got back there in the secondary. I mean, we've got Minka and Joey Porter Jr. and now Jackson. But again, I don't know what to make of Jackson. So I guess probably the secondary is not going to be slower than it was last year. It was pretty slow last year. Um, it should be faster, and that so I guess there's an argument to be made that it's somewhat it could be better. It should be better, but we have positions to fill there that it's hard to know exactly what to expect. So this is kind of meandering, but I guess my answer is that I don't know exactly what to hope, where what the reasonable hope is for the defense. I think I'm sort of thinking defensive line might be a weakness, but if it's not, if defensive line is fine, linebackers should be good, and then I guess so. You're shutting down the run. You're creating a good pass rush, and the secondary can make plays off. Being a faster secondary, they can make plays off the pass rush. I guess that's the hope. That's the way it goes well. And I can imagine probably more ways that it doesn't go well. But maybe that's the correct answer to your question.
So it sounds like the linebackers are the strength of the team, and there's a little more hope that the D line will complement them than the secondary will complement them.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, maybe Cam Hayward is getting old too, so maybe that's just not well advised to put a lot of stake in the defensive line being good. But if they're good, then we should have a good front seven, and then again, our secondary should be, I think, modestly good. And Minka had a down year last year. I think hopefully he's sort of back to. I couldn't really tell if he had a down year for scheme reasons or because people were throwing away from him, but I'm used to him making more plays than he did last year. I mean, and he had to make a lot of plays in the run game last year. I remember there were times when he was like our leading tackler, and that was not wonderful. But Cam Hayward was hurt for a lot of the year too. So that's probably what made that tough.
All right, and then the final Steelers question I have for you, and I guess we can bookend this around the break if we have to. But I was thinking about the sustained success that the Steelers have had, and winning 6 Super Bowls. Apparently, the most AFC title game appearances. Did you know that one? I didn't know that one.
I did not. I mean, that's probably going to fall soon. Mahomes going every year.
The one that was crazy to me was the most conference championship games hosted in either. You have 8, and the Chiefs, we got 6 in a row, I think, or 5 in a row. I'm forgetting now. Did we do 5 or 6 in a row in Arrowhead? I think we did 5 in a row in Arrowhead, and then the 6th one. Yeah, 5 in Arrowhead, and then the 6th one was involved. So we're still 3 behind because the first one was our first one. Then the highest post-merger winning percentage, and Chuck Noll is the only coach that ever went back-to-back twice, winning back-to-back Super Bowls twice. Basically, clearly infrastructure that provides for success. So then my question to you is, the Rooneys have owned this team throughout its entire run, right? I don't know if they bought it somewhere in between, but at least throughout its... How much of their success, the team's success, do you attribute to the way that the Rooneys run things, how they are as people, and how much credit do you think should go to owners in general when teams are successful?
Yeah. So I think one aspect of the Rooneys sort of ownership style, obviously, when you think about them, the thing that jumps out is their patience with their coaches, right? Like they'll keep them for a long time. We've had 3 head coaches since like 1960, whenever that was, maybe 7, a long time ago. We've had only 3 head coaches: Noel, Cowher, and Tomlin. So that's, I think, a good thing. I think the longer you're in the position, the longer you. I mean, you can see it being a bad thing depending on who the person is that's in the position. But I think if you have someone that's as driven as those guys have been, then it's a good thing. The more experience you have, the more you know the ins and outs of the game, and the more you know the sort of places you might have levers to tip things to your advantage, right? And I think that. I think the same is true, honestly, with quarterbacks. The longer you stick with a quarterback, the more you would hope, you would kind of expect them to be better, right? They've seen more coverages. They know what to do against different situations. I think Cam Newton recently had some claim. I think he said something about Justin Fields recently about how, we're not giving people time to develop in the league anymore. And I kind of think that's right. We're sort of used to people coming in like Mahomes and just blowing us out of the water from the get-go. Blowing us out of the water. Well, I guess he did blow the Steelers out of the water, but blowing our minds from the get-go. Whereas, I think being having a more patient approach, and that's why I think I was maybe talking myself into to Pickett for a third year, another year for him to develop and try to learn how to succeed at this level. The longer the better, right? And if you keep trying at something and you are genuinely trying, probably you'll figure some things out sooner or later. Right? So anyway, I think the Rooney's approach to letting their coaches, stick around for a while is a good one. I think. I don't know beyond that, like how much to evaluate them on. Obviously, we've had a run now. We haven't had a playoff win in 7 years. Right? That's not a great stretch. I don't know how much to put on Art Rooney for that. I mean, like when you listen to him talk, he always sounds reasonable. He always sounds like very very measured and he's things are well thought out. That's that's part of the luxury of being rich, right? You have the time to just sit and think about these things, and not only think about what you're going to do, but also how you're going to say it. And so you're going to sound eloquent when you come and finally do give the interview, which is totally on your terms. Maybe it's in your office or whatever, right? So I think there's a lot. Of course, the owners are going to sound like they know what they're doing, right? Or at least well, not of course. There are
Yeah, I
some
was
owners
about
who
to
don't,
say some of
right?
them don't.
Yeah, they should, right? They have every advantage, so they really ought to. So I don't know. It's like that makes it hard for me to judge. I think like there's this sort of brute reaction, which is like, yeah, that seems like whenever I hear Art Rooney talk and his appraisal of what the season was like, it's like, yeah, it seems totally reasonable. But I don't know. It's one of those situations where I just don't know exactly what to, aside from not firing coaches on short, not giving coaches on short leashes. I don't know how much to attribute, good or bad, to the owners. I don't know if you have a take on that.
No, I'm not really much more than that. It honestly seems like the best owners are the people that understand that their football guys know football and let them do their jobs. I mean, it
Mm.
seems like every time there's a bad owner, it's because they meddle too much. So I
Hmm.
agree. I don't really know, like, how much is the owner actually setting the culture? I don't know. I mean, like for us, the Hunt family's owned the Chiefs forever, and once we got a good coaching infrastructure in, like we started winning. You know, so
Yeah, and it wasn't the owners that did something unique there. It was just they hired the right guy, essentially.
yeah, and that's my one question is with the Chiefs. I think it's clearly they hired the right guy. But when you have someone like the Rooney's, who like every coach in the last like 60 years has been a hit, and it's like, then you wonder like, is it just hiring the right guy or a combination of hiring the right guy and providing some kind of environment that helps them grow? Because like, was Tomlin this good of a leader of men when he first walked in the door? Like maybe, but like, were Tomlin, Cower, and Noel all as good as they ended up at the end when they started? Like, again, maybe, but I wonder if there's something about the environment they're providing that's helping them grow as leaders too.
Yeah, I think probably that's right. I mean, I that might honestly just come back to the job security, though, right? It might just be a thing where if
Yeah.
you have that job security, you have some leeway to sort of experiment and see how to handle situations differently and to see which ways work and which ways don't, as opposed to feeling like you have to manage everything correctly, otherwise you're gone. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that's true.
anyway,
All right. Well, with that, let's take a break and then we can do general NFL topics.
sounds good.
And we're back. Um, all right. So let's get into some general NFL questions. The first topic, we just actually had the meeting of the NFL's competition committee, and they came back with some interesting changes. They have banned what has been recently called. I don't know that I ever heard this term before. I think the first time I remember it was when Mahomes sprained his ankle in the playoffs last year, when Arden Key did what is now called the hip drop tackle and landed on Mahomes' ankle and gave him a high ankle sprain. And it really took just over a year after that, and now it has been banned in the league. So that's one thing. The kickoff has completely changed, so we can talk about the details of that. And then, as we kind of complained about and hoped for in a previous episode, the NFL is handing over a few more actually like penalty reviews, or at least the ability to pick up a few specific penalties to the eye in the sky. Basically, the replay official in New York is getting a little more leeway. So, what are your thoughts on the? And we can kind of talk about each one individually and describe them as we go through. But what are your thoughts on the competition committee's changes for this upcoming year?
Yeah, I was going to ask you similar questions. The the take them in order, I guess. The hip drop tackle. I don't. Yeah, I had never heard that terminology before very recently either. Maybe it was around the same time that yeah, when Mahomes got injured. But was it Mark Andrews this year that got really hurt from that? Yeah. I don't know how much that's going to affect it. I think people are saying that, like, I think a lot of my Twitter feed is people saying that's going to really change what a defense can do, and it does feel like it definitely makes it harder on the defense, right? I'm on the record as being in favor of more safety uh, and rules that make players safer, and so I think that probably will. Uh, increase the safety of the game, and so in that sense, I'm in favor of it. I guess I would wait to see how it affects what defenses can do. But to be honest, our offense has been so bad for so long that I'll take anything that makes us look more exciting. Right? Like if getting rid of the hip drop tackle is going to help us move a bit further or more down the field at a higher clip, then I think I might be in favor of it. I don't have any sophisticated thoughts about that one though. I don't know if you have any better take on it.
No, not really. Because I think with the two sides being so divided about this, I think it's hard for me to really get an idea of what the actual impact is. Like, on one hand, you're hearing people say that, well, defenders can't go high and they can't launch themselves high specifically. They could still launch themselves low, but it seems the only thing that I can like say that I feel like makes enough sense for me to have an opinion on it is that it does seem like it makes it hard to tackle someone from behind without giving them a lot of forward progress. if you're, especially if you're a smaller guy trying to tackle a bigger guy.
Mm.
Um, but the NFL says that this has only been happening like once or twice in a game. So on that hand, maybe it's not as big of a change as one would think. The only part that really concerns me is not so much the rule change, but the referee's ability to officiate this in real time, because that's been tough with all the rule changes. Things that aren't actually penalties by the law of the land get called penalties and don't get picked up. So I'm worried about it from that aspect of it, but otherwise, like I don't know if it's really happening as infrequently as the NFL says. Then maybe it's not going to be as much of a change as we think it is. Maybe it's just one of those we got to wait and see.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't. It does feel to me like hip drop tackle. I can't even say that right. I keep wanting to like hip drop tackle. Uh, is more common than the horse collar tackle. I mean, obviously they outlawed the horse collar tackle. But those are tackles. It's such an odd tackle that you can it always stands out when it's made, right? And I don't remember thinking those were not very frequent. I don't think. Whereas this does feel like a more frequent tackling form, and so I mean, once or twice a game is yeah, it's not that much, I guess, and so maybe that's the thinking that it's not going to affect things too much. Uh, I wonder. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'm on your side here. We'll just see where that goes, essentially. But you know,
So, and if I understand correctly, I think that the main danger of a hip drop tackle is when the player that is pulling the ball carrier down lands on their legs as they're twisting them. So you almost wonder if, like, entirely legislating it out was like a too broadly addressing it. If maybe like Although I don't know how you can, you might practically end up legislating it out just by banning people doing it and landing on someone's legs, for example,
Hmm.
because so maybe practically it doesn't really matter. And then I did hear too, I think it was Mitchell Schwartz that said that they should maybe make it more specific, like, because it seems like most of the injuries happen when the player is grabbed above the waist and then the body weight is pulled down. So maybe, that specifically should have been banned. But I don't know. If, again, I guess we're coming back to that same conclusion of we'll just kind of have to see the effects.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean, they have done similar things like you can't land on the leg, you can't land with your full weight on the quarterback, right? I mean, they have done similar things about and how they framed rules before. So they could have done that, right? They could have said like you can do it, but you can't land on their legs. And I don't know if maybe they have. I don't know if they have any more control over that than they have. I mean, they arguably do have some control over whether they land with their full weight on the quarterback. But I don't know how much you have. I've never made a hip drop tackle before, so I don't know how it goes. Um, but so to the kickoff, yeah, I was trying to get clear on what it's going to look like now, and it sounds like it's going to be pretty radically different, right? So, uh, still kicked off from the 35-yard line, but the kicking team's players are at the opponent's 40. They're all lined up there, and then the return team there's like a 5-yard gap between the 40 where the kicking team's players are, and then the returning team's players line up. I think most of them between the 35 and the 30, and then they have the two deep guys, right? And so yeah, so they can do that. So there's less like speed built up as the kicking team is running down the field, and I think no one can move until
The
the
ball's caught.
ball is. Yeah, wow, okay, yeah, this is gonna. I don't know. I think I need to see this happen a few times to sort of get a grip on exactly what it's going to look like. But no one can move till the ball's caught, so everyone's going to be watching, and then suddenly have to go find who they're supposed to be blocked. I think this could be interesting. It definitely will be interesting to see what happens here. I think, right, so it does eliminate surprise onside kicks. You have to declare that you're doing an onside kick, and then I guess you line up in the old formation again,
Mhm.
and you can do that like twice in the fourth quarter or something. I don't there's some.
Oh,
I
I
think there's
didn't
some limit
remember.
about how many times you can do it. But uh, and then there's also something about where the touchback goes to, right? If it's if it goes out the back of the end zone, I think it goes to the 30, and then if it is down to, I don't know about when, if it rolls into
So,
the end zone, I think it goes to the 20, but I don't know.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think I thought it was if it goes into the end zone, it's a 35.
Okay.
Uh, and if it rolls into the end zone, like if it lands inside the 20 and rolls into the end zone, it's to the 20. But if it doesn't make it to the 20, then I think you get the ball to 40. It's like treated like a kickoff out of bounds. So you
Okay.
have to land the ball within between the 20 and the goal line.
Yeah. This sounds, it sounds complicated, but probably it's just like every other rule in football where like I'm just used to those. And once I see this played out a bit, it will not be complicated. But, um, uh, yeah, I am very curious how, like, kickoff for a little while now has been a sort of just like like a pro forma kind of play, right? It's like, oh, we got to have that in between the drives, but no one really cares about the kickoff. And this does feel like it should make it more significant, or could make it more significant. It seems like there's a kind of built-in, right? I mean, if teams start, if it results in a lot of long returns, then teams are just going to start kicking it out of the end zone and giving them the ball in the 35 or whatever they get, wherever they get it, right? So it does have a sort of safety mechanism, so that it's not going to change the game too much, I feel like. But it does feel like it could be a. I kind of am curious what would happen if they didn't have that safety mechanism in there, where it's just like uh, I don't know quite how to frame the rule in that case, but to have like, could you imagine the game at football becoming such that like the kickoff return was like one of the most important plays, like it just sets up everything essentially, uh, like almost eliminating the offensive drive as it were, as a thing. I don't know. It would be such a different game. And I'm sure they're hoping it's not like that. But anyway, I don't know. Uh, it'll be interesting to see what teams do with it. I think. I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for this. I think this was a great idea because, like you said, the kickoff was a pro forma play. And the way that they had kind of eliminated the wedge and everything, it was becoming increasingly hard to return anything for to have significant kickoff returns. Um, so, especially with Dave Tobe as as our special teams coordinator, and he was the guy that coordinated Devin Hester in Chicago, and he was very successful in Kansas City for a long time. Up through, I would say, like 2018, 2019, we would always get like a couple returns for touchdown every year. And I just feel like it's become increasingly hard league wide to do that. So the thing that's most exciting to me about this is we've kind of eliminated the idea of having people that are on kick coverage at different levels of the field. Like everyone's like at the same, so you burst through the line and you're like through, right? Like if you can set up a hole and you scheme up a hole, you just got to make one. And there's not a lot of pursuit. So I feel like that'll be really interesting. The one thought I had strategically, the one thing about just like setting up returns and how they'll block those up is going to be so important. And I think that's where I think roster construction is going to change a little bit with people prioritizing special teams players a little more. Because suddenly, if you can score out of this, you would maybe give another 53-man roster spot to a special teams guy to increase your probability of doing that. Because I feel like increasingly kick return had been less and less prioritized in roster building because it was becoming a useless play. The only other thing that I think is interesting is that if you're trying to get the ball into that just the 20-yard range, and I don't know about accuracy and all that, and you as a coverage team are that much more vulnerable now, is it worth having a position player kick off? Like, in order to have a reliable tackler as the last line of defense, if they could reliably just get the ball inside between the 20 and the goal line, like should you just have a position player kick off?
Because you don't want to rely on you. Yeah, right. Your kickers
Yeah.
as the last line of defense. I mean, I think I'm so given that the player like the kicking team's players are at the 40, they don't all have to run forward, right? Once the ball is caught, you could
It's
imagine some
true.
of them hanging back. I think the
It's
natural
true.
reaction, of course, is run toward the ball carrier, but I think you might see some schemes where some of them selectively stay back to set up a more variegated front, I guess,
That's a good
which
point.
would be harder, I imagine, you break through one level, but there's still more people behind it in that case. So,
And then if you were to do that, then I think that having a kicker would actually be really important because if you're going to do that, you'd want to know where the ball is going.
that's right.
Like, if you have an unreliable kicker, you could really screw up there. Especially,
Yeah.
if you're expecting a kick to the left, then they could really kind of align in a way to kind of corner off that return. But if the kicker ends up putting it to the middle or something, you wouldn't have any idea as the return team, and that would be a real problem.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll see. Well, I mean, I never really paid much attention to the directionality of kickoffs, but I wonder if we'll see more intentional setups where, yeah, they kick toward the left, and then like the people on what the kicking team's right side crash down at so they have like a sort of triangle
Mm-hmm.
forcing toward the sideline there. I can imagine that being a strategy, but I don't know. Well, it'll be fun to see what people do with it. I think.
I think anything to try to make it an exciting, because for me, some of my formative years were when Dante Hall was returning punts and kicks. So anything to make, and then Devin Hester came right after that. So just had this long streak in the NFL of the return man being so exciting. So I think it would be great if we. Also, did you see that? I didn't confirm this, but I think Pro Football Reference tweeted it out while we were on break that the Steelers signed Cordero Patterson. I feel like
Really?
guys
No,
like
I did
him are going
not.
to be like really exciting. We'll have to check that this actually happened, but I thought I saw it on Twitter before coming back. But
How old
it
is he
makes
now?
old.
Yeah, yeah.
I would guess
Hopefully,
like
still
34,
fast.
35. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Uh,
surprised he's still around. Kind of. I mean, not that he's still alive, but that he's still in the league. I'm surprised. Anyway,
well, he might have some more value if he can still run fast. And suddenly, a lot of Chiefs fans are like, maybe we should keep Kadarius Toney.
yeah,
Like suddenly having a guy like him is might be really useful.
yeah. Well, yeah. So I mean, this segues nicely into a question that I mean, we still got to talk about the replay issue, but that's less of a gameplay, I think, as opposed to more just like game watching and the speed of the game. But I do want to ask your take on significant changes to the rules like this, right? Because because it can, I don't know. I mean, there's like one reaction where when you make a significant change to the way the game is played or has to be played, uh, you're now you're kind of playing a different game, right? And you almost feel like if it's significant enough, then it, you know, it's like the game that I used to like isn't here anymore. This is another game, and maybe it's fun for its own reasons. But so on the one hand, I can sort of see the motivation for keeping things roughly the same. Again, modifications for player safety and whatnot would be I'm all in favor of. But I think the flip side of that is that if you look at the game in the 19 like 30s or 40s, it was a very different game and not one that I would probably enjoy watching that much. Um, Now, is it like more objectively exciting now that we've made all the changes? Like, if you took someone from the 1930s and you showed them today's game, what would they think of it? I have no idea. But anyway, this is just a sort of ramble. But what do you think about major changes like this in general to the rules of the game?
I definitely think they should be considered very carefully, just because not only from like an enjoyment standpoint, but even from the league's own standpoint. Like, there's a reason why your game is popular right now, and you don't want to lose that essence with anything that you're doing. But I do think that a certain degree of creativity is important. I will always be for rule changes that are in attempt to make the game safer and or more fun. Um, but you know, it has to be carefully considered. I hear that when the NBA added a 3 point line, there was like a huge backlash. Like, what is going on? Like, what are you doing? You're entirely changing the game. And but it ended up being, and now they're looking at ways to try to tweak it now because they finally it may have gone too far where it's become so dependent on the 3 pointer. But yeah, I think it's something that always needs to be considered. But like you're saying, you definitely need to have some awareness of whether you're actually changing the essence of the game, because the game as it is popular for a reason, and you don't want to lose that.
Yeah. Um, this reminds me of Larry David's suggestion about the extra point. He thinks that you shouldn't have the goal, get rid of the goalposts, and I guess no field goals. So you have to either punt or go for it on fourth down, and then for the point after, if you get it at the 2 yard line, and if you get in from there, you get it's something about like if you start you can choose whether you want to start the 2 or the 4 or the 6 or something like, and then you get a different number of points based on whether you can convert it, which is like such a major change. I mean, like that would be that's bigger than the kickoff change we're talking about now. But uh, I mean, like he makes a not bad case for it. It's like, what are the exciting plays? It's not when you're kicking the ball through the uprights, right? I mean, occasionally at the end of the game, if it hinges on it, then yes. But the plays that are fun to watch, where like someone does something athletically fascinating or interesting or like worth thinking about more. It's not like they swung their leg and the ball went through the uprights. It's like someone made a leap over or one-handed catch in the end. Those are the kinds of plays that you think about. And so, it, you know, maybe that would make the game more exciting. But there's also an element of like I know enough about how the game works at this point that I know what to get excited about and what not to get excited about. Whereas if we made such a major change like that, I wouldn't really know sort of how to think about things anymore. So I don't know.
Yeah, that The Larry David argument, I had actually first heard from a podcaster, former offensive lineman named Ross Tucker. I remember when I was back in med school, so this must have been like 2014, 2013, something like
Yeah.
that. I remember him first just saying that kickers should be eliminated from the game. And his argument was, I think Larry David also makes this point that the art of the kick is so different from any other part of the game. Like it's almost like you're bringing someone in to play a different sport for a couple plays, and it's like completely different from everything else. Like why? And like the entire livelihoods of the teams depend on these people successfully kicking it through the uprights. Like you can do everything right as an offense, and then this 175-pound guy comes in and misses a kick, and you lose the game. You know, so I definitely hear that argument. It's interesting that it is such a different, because back in the day, like position players used to be kickers too, and no one made any kicks. So, like, it was just an unreliable thing. It's not like people were banking on someone being automatic from 40 yards. Like, no one, it was very hard to make kicks, and a lot of times your running back or your quarterback was also your kicker. And scoring in general was down. So I think that it was, like you said, it was a completely different game. Like I remember once, even when we were kids, it had changed so much. I remember reading a book when I must have been in elementary school still, about a kid playing football, and the character's name was Chip something. It was like high school football or something. And part of the strategy in the game was doing like a surprise punt for field position. And I remember even at like in the late 90s being like, what? Like, why would you punt the ball if you didn't have to punt the ball? But apparently, like, when scoring is that much of a premium, and sometimes like flipping the field actually mattered because no one was going to move the ball more than 20 yards. So like you'd surprise punt when they didn't return it, and so you could back them up. Like it was just a different game back then when kicking was created.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Steelers did a couple surprise punts, but those were always on fourth down when we made it look like we were going for it, and then Ben would like do this. You could always see it as a Steelers fan. You saw it coming, right? And then surprisingly, some other teams didn't see it coming as much as they should have. But he would always be like acting like he's talking to the wide receivers, backing up sort of subtly, and then oh, we're punting, right? They did that a couple times, but a surprise punt on like I take it like a second or third down or something would
Exactly.
be what you're mentioning here, and that's yeah. I mean, I guess there were times in the last couple of years where one could have motivated that for the Steelers, but there would at least have been an argument for it. But I don't think. Yeah, that's pretty foreign, right? Um, so we didn't say anything yet about the replay changes. I mean, that sounds great, right? Like we should have more of that. That's my 1 cent on that, but I don't know if I have anything more sophisticated.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's notable that they kind of were talking about the same thing that we were talking about. That they're really looking at just like, okay, on roughing the passer, did he actually hit the guy's head or not? Or like very clear and obvious. On a late hit out of bounds, was he actually out of bounds before he got hit? And the other one was intentional grounding. Like, was he actually out of the pocket when the throw was made? Like these more objective things that are very easy, and I think they should just continue to expand this. Like, things that are very simple and very clear. Just have someone make a call, pick up the flag, and keep moving. Why are we sticking with penalties that we all know watching the replay aren't actually penalties?
Yeah, and they're just oh well, we made the wrong call. We cannot change it for no good reason. Yeah, yeah. Um, well, I have a totally different question for you um,
All right.
about really about NFL fandom in general. But we talked last week about watching old highlights and sort of reliving um, moments from the past. Uh, and like part of me has always kind of felt guilty whenever I'm like sitting down and watching another another go through of Ben's double six touchdown games or whatever, right? It's like I mean, couldn't I be doing something better with my time right now? But after last week, I started to think about that and wonder whether that's like there might be a good justification for watching highlights. And so I have one in my back pocket here, but I wonder if you have a take on sort of if there's a value to watching old highlights or not.
Well, I think part of it is for me the like nostalgia. That's like I will specifically try to go back and look for stuff from when I was a kid. Like I'll look for like Elvis Gerback highlights and like these plays that. And I will say, even from a cognitive standpoint, I think watching old highlights, especially if you go through like more game script highlights, like actually like sequentially through a game, you'll be surprised what you don't remember or how you remember things wrong. So it's a good like humbling experience to be like, oh, I was so sure that this happened, but I guess that didn't. It was on a different drive and it was in a different sequence, and that happens to me not infrequently.
Is it? But it's memory about like the order in which things occurred, or exactly what happened on that play. Is that what it is?
It's more about the order or like what the score was when this play happened, and I thought this
Hmm.
play was the play that gave us the lead, but it actually tied the game, or it actually brought us within one score. And, or I thought this was like really crucial at the end of the fourth quarter, but actually there were 7 minutes left. It's stuff like that, or
Yeah.
like you like slightly misremember the kind of sequence in which things happened. Um, but I also think that compared to most, I have a much more liberal take on wasting time. Like, I think people don't have enough. They don't try to have enough fun in their lives, and so you know, I'm I'm okay with doing things that are fun and bring you enjoyment, as long as they're not like setting you back in your life. So
Yeah.
I definitely don't ever feel guilt about watching football highlights unless I have like a task that I should be doing.
Yeah. Well, I guess I always feel like I have some task that I should be doing, and so there's always like a twinge of guilt. But maybe that's just like the academic life. I don't know, right? Like it's, I got myself into this situation. I always feel like there's something I should be doing. But there can't be that many people that are looking for Elvis Gerback highlights, right? Like is that easy to find?
Not always. What I've found actually is the easiest thing to find is how NFL films will do like a season recap for every season. It's some people have uploaded like the 1997 Chiefs season film, like that VHS has been uploaded to YouTube. So that's the easiest way
Yeah.
to find like old highlights. I feel like.
And that lets you like relive the kind of the narrative of the season and whatnot, which is probably pretty
Yeah.
fun.
And
Um,
there are a lot of full games on YouTube now too. So if you know like the game you're looking for, going back and finding those isn't that hard either.
Speaking of which, we have to relive that game that we went to, the Steelers Chiefs game from
Oh
2011 at
yeah,
some point.
yeah,
I
we
still
have
have
to do
that.
it.
I still have that window open. Um, uh, for those who don't know, there was a really miserable game between the Chiefs and Steelers that we went to on Sunday Night Football in 2011. And at some point, we're going to relive it and try to get some content out of that for the podcast because it was a quite an experience for both. Like, not neither of us had a good time. Right? Like that was awful.
No, that'll be
Um,
a good memory test because I feel like I've blocked a lot of that game out. Like it'll be fun to go back and be like, "Wow, that happened, really?"
It ended up being Tyler Palco versus Ben
Yeah.
Roethlisberger. And whew, that was not a fun one. But let me give you my like 2 cents for justifying why it's actually sort of like justifiable to go back and watch old highlights. So uh, the I feel like, and maybe let me know if you have this experience too. But like when you're watching a season as like live, you're watching plays live, or even just plays that are happening in the same season as the one that's going on right now, then everything sort of like the way you view everything is sort of colored by like, is this helping us get to the playoffs, and is this indicative that we could win the Super Bowl, right? You're sort of like, it's always future directed. Like, is it going to get us there, and does it show that we could win it if we get there, right? uh, and I think when you look at past highlights, especially from years that are like further back, where like you don't have anyone from then on your team anymore, you can sort of just more like appreciate them for what they were at that point, which is like a really cool, really athletic play that this person made, or like again going back to like some of the highlights from Ben to Brown. Neither of them are around anymore, so it's not like watching those is telling me anything about our prospects this year. Uh, but I do get to relive some like really fun moments, and I get to relive them sort of. without the added sort of future, like the fear or the anxiety about where the season is headed, essentially on the basis of that play. So I feel like you just get to like appreciate them for what they were more when you watch the highlights. I don't know. That's my take.
No, I agree with that. I will say though that I think part of that comes from you having rooted for a good team for like so I never had that kind of anxiety until we got Mahomes. Like watching a Chiefs game, I feel like I was actually able to be in the moment. I wasn't really thinking about because like I didn't think we were gonna win the Super Bowl, so like it wasn't really about pretending anything to the future, and that actually was something I really had to work on around the like 2020 2021 stage where I was just like I'm getting way too stressed out and not enjoying this experience because a week 3 game, I'm just thinking about like, well, we can't win the Super Bowl because like, and so I really tried to dial it back and just be like, I feel like that helped me this past season. Like, I wasn't freaking out. Like I will say, after we lost to the Raiders in Christmas, I was like, maybe that was the first time when I was like, maybe this team can't win the Super Bowl. But I never was despondent about the season, and I think it was just because I am very intentionally trying to be in the moment with this team because it stinks to like go through a whole year and a really successful year and then just to feel like crap at the end. You're like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Uh, that's a really yeah. I don't think I think I just like assumed that was everyone's way of watching the games. Since I watched the Steelers, they were usually contending, right, and not so much recently. But yeah. So there's more of a difference between watching the live games and watching highlights when your team is good, um, because the highlights again you sort of remove the anxiety from them that you have during the live game. And I guess like I mean like let, let me get Proustian again real quick. I mean this is kind of like how life is, right? Like you look back at like older memories or whatever, and you can see what was happening then differently than you saw it at the time because at the time you didn't know what was going to happen after that. You didn't know, you had anxieties or fears or hopes or whatever that you don't have now, or at least the way things went then doesn't influence whether those are going to be fulfilled or not now. So uh, there, watching highlights is just a little window into into what one's life or something like that. I don't know, but one's experience of life.
Well, yeah, and I think so. So, what I was talking about with football, I think we definitely do with life in general. I remember first thinking this when I was in college, and I was really stressed out in college. The classes were hard. You're going through all that, and I remember I used to think so fondly about high school, and I would be like, "Man, that was so much fun." And then I was like, when I was in high school, I don't think I was sitting being like, "Oh, this is so much fun." And I feel like that is kind of the case of the human experience is that we're all either reminiscing about things in the past that we weren't actually enjoying as much while it was happening, but now we think of fondly, or we're thinking about stuff in the future that we will not enjoy that much while we're going through them because we'll be thinking about the past at that point or something else in the future. But we don't do a lot of just appreciating what's going on right now. And so I think part of my Chiefs experience is that overall intentionality that I think it's really important to me to try to just enjoy what's going on now, be grateful for what I have now, be grateful for what's going on now, and just to be happy in the moment. And because it to me is just a sad existence. I don't want to have that existence where I'm always thinking about a time that's not now.
Yeah, or you're always thinking about like a 10-minute moment of time when you win the Super Bowl or something like that. Like, can we get to that moment? And then when you're there, it's 10 minutes and then it's over. Right? um, you know. On the other, I mean, I like that. I do think, right, it would be better to live more in the moment in a lot of respects. I think sometimes sort of features of like how you evaluate a particular event depends on what happens after it sometimes. And so sometimes I think it's just impossible to live too much in the
Yeah.
moment, right? You'll have a different perspective on whether this was a good thing or a bad thing based on things that happened later, essentially. So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I think it,
and completely living in the moment would be chaos because you couldn't prepare for anything. You couldn't plan for
Yeah,
anything. Couldn't set
yeah,
yourself up for yeah. So, but I do think that at least as far as the enjoyment piece, trying to just appreciate what is. Yeah, for me, a real motivator recently, or at least the last maybe 5-10 years, has been just the idea of gratefulness, like intentionally trying to be grateful for what I do have, because I think, like some people, or maybe not most people, I don't know, but I think I do have a lot, and I think it's easy to forget that. And so
mm,
I think I am a happier person when I am a little intentional about that.
yeah, yeah. That's that's right. I think that's right. Um, well, we probably should take a break soon. Do you want to? I don't know if we have anything brief on the NFL in general, or should we take a
Oh,
break
I,
and come
I
back?
can just ask you a really quick question that has a very short answer. Um, can you name all the teams that Ed Reed played for?
Well, I would have thought, but maybe I'm like misremembering. Did he end his career in some mysterious, or begin his career in some mysterious way? Wait, we're talking about NFL teams here, right?
Yeah, yeah, just NFL teams.
I mean, I just thought he played for the Ravens, to be honest.
Oh, so you'll be
Is there
even
more
more
to?
surprised than me. So after in 2013, he went to the Texans as a free agent, and but he had labral surgery before the season started. He actually got released during the season, and the Jets picked him up on waivers, and he played 7 games for the Jets and had 3 picks in the 2013 season. The reason why that came up is I saw a picture on Twitter of Ed Reed in a Jets jersey, and I was like, "What? When did Ed Reed play for the Jets?" And so I looked up his career. Yeah, apparently I remembered him signing with the Texans, and I don't remember anything else about that. But yeah, he played for the Jets and had 3 interceptions in the 2013 season.
Well, I did not remember any of that.
I
Right?
don't think I knew it in the moment, honestly. Like maybe I did and I've completely forgotten, but I don't know. Anyway, on that note, we can take a break and maybe we can do our anecdotes after.
Sounds good.
And we're back. Um, Time for our personal anecdotes to close things out. I think, Chris, it is your turn to go first.
Okay. Well, I might need some help from you remembering some slight details of this one, but if you remember it, do you remember when we were breeding fruit flies in our
Yeah,
biology class? And when was that? Like ninth grade?
ninth grade, yeah.
Uh, and one of the students in our class, I think it was the same one that took the shot of Papa John's garlic sauce, by the way, uh, dropped the vial of, like, we had the flies in these little vials. We were crossing them and seeing like what are the red eyes, curly wings, or whatever, right? Like what are the dominant traits? Uh, I think dropped it and then it broke and the flies started scattering. And I can't quite pick put the pieces together here, but I remember him smashing to try to kill the flies very quickly before they got away.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
but isn't it a glass? Like, so why didn't that cut his hand? I don't quite understand at this point.
I
But
thought he was
anyway,
stepping on him. Was it
oh,
was
maybe
it
that's
him?
what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah, I thought he was stepping on
Yeah,
it.
that's what I think it was. Okay, so just drop it and then I gotta stop on it. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what you had to do in that case. But yeah, that was it.
So I remember because I think that's what alerted me to the situation was him stomping on a bunch of glass and just being like, "What is happening over there?"
Yeah,
Man,
I think I watched it play out, and then it's like, oh, I would have done the same thing if that were me. I think, but um, well, that was a good time.
yeah, I
Poor
forgot
flies
we did that. Yeah,
live their whole
yeah.
life in a little vial, and then just we're free, and then they get smashed.
Smashed it. I seem to remember mine experiment not going very well, which was a trend for me in practical labs in science. Like, I don't know what I did wrong, but I think I did something wrong.
Like crossed them wrong, or I don't know. Yeah,
Or like a lot of them didn't survive for some reason, or like they didn't like hatch. Oh, that's what, because we would cross them and then like they were supposed to grow like hatch, right? Like, from the And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember like getting like two flies or something, and I was like, "What happened? Why did I
You
get
can't get
any
any
flies?"
proportions in that case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
that's it.
my anecdote, I just remember this randomly from. Remember, we took an AP psychology course together when we were in seniors in high school, and I remember it was like the last period of the day, and so our parking lot would get kind of crazy when you're leaving. So we were always very strongly incentivized to try to leave early if at all possible, and our teacher knew this and like obviously like couldn't just let us go, but I feel like was more sympathetic than most to the fact that we wanted to leave early. And I don't know why I just remembered this, but I think we had a couple people in our class that would. I think they almost like considered her a little more as a peer. She must have been really young. Like she couldn't have been more than like in her high 20s max. I feel like when we were in that class, like definitely way younger than we are now. And I remember a couple of the students one day were like really pushing her to let us out early. And she was like, I can't just let you all go. Like, I can't let you all go. And she's like, fine. Uh, if the first person that can name my favorite Lost character gets to leave early. And I had never watched Lost, but I knew that Naveen Andrews, who's a British Indian actor, because I had seen him in some like Indian stuff. I knew he played someone who was from Iraq in the show. So I just said the Iraqi guy, and she was like, "Yes." I remember like not even like looking back. Like I just grabbed my backpack and I just walked right out. I was like, "I want to beat this traffic out of the parking lot." Like, never seen the show or anything, but she was like, "Who could name my favorite Lost character?" I was like, "The Iraqi guy." She's like, "Yes," and I was like, "All right, I'm out."
I'm gone. Right. I vaguely maybe remember that. Although I didn't remember the parking lot being a thing, but I guess that's right. It would get very packed up.
I
That's good.
I remember that being a priority because I used to never. So when I was in our junior year, my fourth period was our like study hall period because I had another class at the university that I used to go to every other day, fourth period, because we had block scheduling. But I basically the significance of that is I'd never experienced the parking lot traffic ever because I was never at school at the end of fourth period. But then senior year, that class was second period, so I was there every day at fourth period, and I never had study hall. So I was exposed to this chaos that I was not used. I feel like everyone else was accustomed to it, but I was like, "What is this traffic? Like, I've never done this before."
I do. I have this vague memory of you just like, yep, he's gone. Right. Like,
I'm just like, I didn't even look back. Like I was just everybody else can fend for themselves. Like I'm out.
I don't think I knew anything about Lost aside from the fact that people were all very excited about it at the time. But, well, good times. Um, anyway, is that is that it for
Yeah,
this week?
I think that's it for episode 7, 8, 8.
8? Yeah, we're on
Oh.
8.
Well,
Sooner our anecdotes are going to be about like episode 1.
yeah, that's true. That'll be really the passage of time. Like we will run out of like school stories and have to start talking about college stories. That's when
Yeah,
you know we've had a lot of episodes.
yeah, yeah. I almost did a college story for today, but I found a better one.
All right. Well, we'll be back next Tuesday with episode 9.
Yeah. Thanks for following us.
All right. Until next time.